What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Crimson Connective, where today we're discussing the Utah-Washington matchup with Utah Athletics SI Fan Nation reporter Lars Hanson. Lars, how you doing?
Good, Cole. Good to see you. Good to meet you. Not virtually, I guess. But I heard nothing but good things about you. So from our man up on the left here.
Yeah, we've got Alex crashing the party today, and I know that Alex has got some questions for you before we jump into it.
Man, I gotta crash the party. But hey, first off, Colt. So he's covering the Utah site.
Ugh.
You're good, man. No, Lars over with the Washington side over here and the locked on stuff that they do as well. But bro, like I wanted to jump on this, man, because you and me go back, dude, from the old Rivals days, definitely had a good relationship with you going back and forth, but really kind of like spilled over even, just outside of the sites, man, just always checking in on each other, making sure, you know, just from that friendship standpoint that things were always good, man. So wanted to jump on because I always appreciate you, dude. It's always fun talking with you.
You
So.
too, man. And I told you, my evenings and weeknights are usually hard to do, but you sent the message, so I had to make time for you, brother. I
There
would.
you go, buddy. There you go, dude. So it's Cole's show, man. I only fill in when I have to, right? And but so again, wanted to just jump on real quick, man. Wanted to reminisce with you for a minute, dude. Like this is there's been some pretty storied matchups over the years with Utah and Washington, right? And granted, I mean, it hasn't, there's been years where it hasn't happened, just because of how the whole scheduling stuff has gone, but dude, every time it's a big game between these two, and it's usually so close. And for the most part, Washington's gotten the better of it, right? They stole the Pac-12 championship from Utah on that on the bogus PI, the PI incident. But yeah, man, dude, how surreal is it that this thing is the Pac-12 is over, man? And what kind of memories do you have from the Utah Washington series?
Yeah, it was crazy that you mentioned that because I was looking back on the series the last decade and kind of just Washington's won most of them, but it's always been close. It's always been within a possession or two, and it's usually been one play here, one play there. I mean, Byron Murphy gets the benefit of the doubt. Dylan Morris somehow pulls nothing out of something with a nothing offensive coordinator and John Donovan in the COVID season. So, I mean, this matchup has had everything, and I think that's what you expect out of there, right? I mean, yeah, you can look at the Utah Oregon game and think, oh, maybe, but then you look at the Arizona State game and it's like, wait, Arizona barely lost to Washington at home on the road, right? And at Husky Stadium where Utah's coming. So it's like this matchup is kind of maybe a perfect opportunity for Utah to get a payback on some of the unfortunate bounces that have not gone their way in this rivalry over the past few years.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to let you two go dive deep on all this stuff. I'm really interested to hear, your breakdown and on what you're expecting and everything. But, to me, it's really going to be something where either Utah's going to pull off the upset or Utah's going to get blown out, man. There's really no in between with this team. You don't know what to expect. It's been nuts. But at the same time, too, Washington's defense is so susceptible that you don't know, man. So it's gonna be. I expect it to be another intense game. But dude, so I know from our conversations, you have some pretty unique insight, especially when it comes to the end of the Pac-12, man. It was crazy because I still remember the day where they were supposed to be having that meeting. I get a phone call that, hey, they just saved the Pac-12. It's going down. Washington and Oregon are on board, and then not even an hour later, I'm getting that phone call that Washington and Oregon made that call like 5-10 minutes before that meeting even happened, man. Just and that was that. So take me through some of that, dude, and then I'm gonna kick it over to Cole so that you guys can do the deep dive.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was one of the situations where it's unfortunate business that had to happen, but it had to happen because this is not this. To your point, this was a pretty quick, decision at the very very end, kind of like a sprint to the end. But this was 4 or 5, 6, 7 years in the making, and really, I'm going to say 4 or 5 because yes, you can go back even a little bit further. But this conference was doomed to end. The longer that television contract ran, the negotiations, the Kirk Schwartz fumbled and things like that. there were opportunities. Yeah, and you can make a case where some schools would have been fine with it, but schools like Utah, schools like Oregon, schools like Washington that have already been carrying the conference, why would they want to sacrifice? And if you think about the deal that could have potentially been had, if they're leading that conference, well, then what are the schools below signing up for? Just to be bottom dwellers? And, it just kind of seemed like everything was trying to be forced, and it just didn't need to be forced. Even though, yes, it's at the same point, you could say, well, it's being forced because you're going all this cross-country travel. But Utah's going back to the Big 12. Washington's kind of getting some new matchups and things like that. But it's not egregious. It's not, it's not something that's not worth taking for such less money that the schools would have gotten from the Pac-12 if they stayed, or the Pac-10 if they stayed together. And then what are you doing? Adding San Diego State and SMU were too late. The more those conversations that I was hearing were having, it's like, okay, look, let's just scrub this, let's break it apart, and now it's the Pac-2. So, and my alma mater is in half of that. So I don't know how I feel. I don't know how I feel about that side of it, because I do think those two schools got kind of unfortunately done by. I'm good. That's the best way that I can put it on a PG-13 PG level here, because believe me, I could say a lot more, but I'm just trying to be professional here because I understand, Washington State, Pullman is way out in the middle of nowhere, but you're telling me Lincoln, Nebraska isn't. Now, again, I understand the difference between the two schools and the culture and all that stuff, but I do think it's a little unfortunate that two schools were kind of left in the dust, and I'm hoping maybe sometime down the line the Big 12 comes and rescues my alma mater, but that's neither here nor there for the time being.
Good old Wazoo grad over here that finally got locked out of his Wazoo email account. I don't know how you were able to keep that so long, man. But man, so just with everything here, yeah, dude. Like I'm gonna miss a lot of these relationships and friendships I've built just from covering the Utes and covering the Pac-12 and everything, man. I'm gonna miss a lot of these road trips too. I'm not looking forward to making road trips to over probably 90% of the Big 12 schools. Yeah. So, but hey, I love talking with you, man. Let's catch up over these next couple days. Let's banter back and forth, especially during the game like we have in the past, dude. And dude, it's good. It's good talking to you, man. I'm glad you're doing well. So I'm just gonna stay in the background now and let you and Cole take it away. So
you're telling me you're not excited to go to Iowa State? Come on, Alex. Come on.
Hey, just tell me where some of the good bars are, because that's probably about the only good entertainment out there.
That's probably true.
That's that having been to Ames and Iowa City, because I got family across the state of Iowa, that's a fact.
See, Troy Coltman, our old site photographer, he's actually living out there right now. That's exactly what he said. He's like, it's like the only good thing is the bars, Alex. So, take it away, fellas.
All right. Well, yeah, we're chatting here with Lars, who covers Washington athletics, not Utah athletics. But yeah, Lars, just want to kind of get a general sense, the feeling on Washington to this point in the season. How is this program able to get back to this level of football and be knocking on a college football playoff berth?
Well, there's a part of it to where it's the new staff, Kalen DeBoer, and bringing in Michael Penix, right? But bringing in one player isn't going to change all that, because we've seen what USC's done with Caleb Williams and all the other players that they brought in. So it's not necessarily just because you're bringing in a handful of new players. Jimmy Lake could not have fumbled the bag more than he did in his time as the Washington head coach, especially in 2021 when he lost the locker room, hired John Donovan, who was an incompetent offensive coordinator, and that basically entire same team. Jalen Polk was on that team. Giles Jackson was on that team. Roma Dunze was on that team. There's so many guys from that team that are making an impact this season. And it's just a matter of, if you can get the right coach with a ideally offensive philosophy, but even still, the defense, as you pointed out, it's not great, but it's certainly not USC level bad. So it's a matter of, okay, as long as you can get the offense in place, and with the pieces they had that he inherited, he just had to build a relationship with his players. And the fact that that's what a head coach of a college football program has to do, it's like, it's a given, isn't it? Well, the last coach would tell you otherwise. So to answer your question in a kind of short, abridged version here, they already had the talent on the roster. They just needed to add a couple of pieces. And the other side of it too, this has been what everybody came back for, right? Michael Penix could have gone to the draft last year. Probably wouldn't have been as high as he's going to go coming year. Roma Dunze and Jalen McMillan both could have gone to the NFL last year. Everybody came back because they felt hard done by losing 2 games to UCLA and Arizona State last season. They almost lost to Arizona State this year. They could almost lose to Utah, but this season has kind of just almost been like everything is falling Washington's way. Like Washington can't not catch a break, right? I mean, and they've gotten some tough, penalties and things like that. But again, they've also gotten away with a few. I'm sure you guys saw the Arizona State game where it's like, how is Jabbar Muhammad not getting flagged for PI over here? And it's like, well, go back and watch the first quarter when 2 ASU defenders like tackled Jalen Polk before the ball got to him. So like Pac-12 reps were just on brand at the end of this crescendoing conference collapse here. So it's worked out for Washington. They've stayed relatively healthy on offense. Michael Penix is about to play 2 full seasons of college football, which I don't think anybody would have believed a few years ago. So just that story in of itself for him has been awesome to cover and awesome to follow for him because he's such a great kid. And these kids, this was such a great locker room. I remember telling people, I don't know if I told Alex, but I told Hod and a few other people at Rivals when I was covering the team in 2021, if the entire coaching staff got fired, the players would be fine. Because the players were truly running that program at that point. They were so tight with each other. They were like, yeah, we just don't have good coaching. And Kalen DeBoer basically picked up right where that left off. He just added good coaching, but he let the players run the program. He's like, hey, no, this is a player-run program. I'm going to guide it. I'm going to make sure it's in my philosophy. But this truly is on the talent on the roster. That's why this team is so good, because the talent is there. It was there in 21. It just didn't have the coaching to match. And now with that perfect kind of triangle operation going on, that's why they're undefeated heading into this matchup, is because they're great on offense, even when they're terrible. I mean, I still can't get over the Arizona State game. That's what terrifies me about this coming Saturday, is the fact that you can not score an offensive touchdown and still beat a team at home. It's like, okay, so you can win the ugliest of ugly games this season. That's what national champions do. That's what,
Right.
playoff teams do, is they get to that point and they catch those breaks. But last season they didn't. So the entire roster came back that could to make that happen for a national championship run here this season.
Yeah, they definitely were just a few steps away, just a few positions, few players away from being great. They obviously went and found those guys. And like you said, I mean, uh, good teams find ways to win. Even an ugly win still counts as is the same as a blowout win or a really good, big win. So it has been everything's been going Washington's way. But I agree with you. This weekend could be interesting. They're facing arguably the best defense that they have faced all season long. So it'll be interesting to see how things go when they are faced, against this tough Utah defense. Um, could you also give us just kind of a quick breakdown of the Huskies, just both individuals and the team as a whole? I mean, what are some a few differences about this team compared to last year, and what areas have they improved outside of the obvious?
So I think I'll give you more players, because that it's like the secondary still has kind of been rough at times, but it's been better than it was last season, and it's been healthier than it was last season. Mish Powell, the Husky nickel, kind of slot cornerback, has been phenomenal again this season. Probably one of the better tackling cornerbacks of any position in the conference. They brought in Jabbar Muhammad from Oklahoma State, who's just he's played more positions in the past few weeks than I thought he would, but it's because he's one of the better cornerbacks in the conference. He doesn't get the name recognition. He's kind of on the smaller size, but he plays above his height. I can tell you that. I mean, we're not neck and neck when we stand next to each other, but it's not far off. And he plays like he's 6'2". Now, yes, he's going to be a little physical and maybe gets away with a hold every now and then, but that, he's a tough, gritty kind of cornerback, where Elijah Jackson and Thaddeus Dixon, who have the size, don't necessarily have the experience and level of coverage skills that Jabbar possesses. So if Jabbar had their height, it's game over. He's probably a day one, maybe early day two pick, just with the ball skills and everything that he possesses. Where they've struggled this season has been the run game. And that's kind of where it struggled last season, right? It's been better, right? It's marginally better, but Oregon still ran all over them. I wouldn't be surprised if Utah has success on the ground, no matter if it's with Jackson or if it's with Vaki or whoever else is running the ball, just because, yeah, even USC ran the ball against Washington. So I think it was a matter of hey, there's this Washington defense can still be got. It's a matter of can Utah's defense, which to your point, and you lean into it, this is going to be the best defense Washington has faced, not Oregon, it's Utah. Ryan Grubb said that on Monday this week. And I'm going to double down on that because it's true. Utah defensively scares me. Like that just always will, and especially with Kyle Whittingham and the mentality that he has as a coach. It's like he's always going to have that team prepared. And again, you can say what you want to about the Oregon game. That it's almost like because of that game, it actually makes me more scared this week because it's like, hey, Utah's now motivated. They've gotten that clunker out of the way. Washington squeaked by Arizona State. Can they do that again? And they've shown that they can get got at home. So I think, the Tulu Gasanoa, the defensive lineman, defensive tackle, he's back. He was back last week. He should play more snaps this week. If he can be a disruptor and kind of slow down Utah's run game, that'll be a big saving grace defensively for Washington, because I think if you guys are probably going to agree with this, Utah without Cam Rising is not the same offensively, certainly from a passing game. Like Cam Rising with him, oh my God, Utah is probably plus. UW is probably plus money in this game, but without him, it's a different story. So they can still run the ball and they can still move the ball, but Washington's cornerbacks really don't matter this much. So it's more about Thule coming back and playing more reps. Javon Parker is another defensive lineman who's, I believe, a redshirt freshman. He's a sophomore because his brother Armand is a redshirt freshman. He's now healthy, but Javon's been one of the more underrated. He's been better than Bear Alexander this season. PFF agrees with me. And I think that if you watch him on tape, you would agree with me. He's the guy who comes in off the bench and is just as disruptive in the run game as he is in the pass game. So I think as long as the defensive line can hold up, UW has a shot in this game defensively.
Bro, you mentioned, sorry to interject. You mentioned Utah's offense without Cam Rising. I know they just put up 55 points, Cole, but I still don't think Utah really has an offense. It's
majority of that was on the ground.
See what happens this game. What's that?
Yeah, majority of the production was on the ground, right? I mean, yeah, Bryson threw 4 touchdown passes, but 168 yards passing, which was good. Like, it's good for him. But yeah, I mean, it's not Cam Rising's offense. It's definitely not. So the defense is going to be relied upon as they have been every single week. And to your point, Lars, another thing, Utah's backs are against the wall. Like, this is it. It's do or die. You have to win this game if you want any shot of being in that final Pac-12 championship game and defending your title. Because if you lose this week, it's pretty much over. So interesting to see how that'll impact things. Lars, how do you expect Washington to attack that Utah defense?
So they're not going to run for 256 again. I just know that because that was an aberration. And Ryan Grubb, even though he admitted, it's easy to run the ball. It's like, really? Because this season you haven't necessarily proven that. Now, part of that is because the run blocking hasn't necessarily opened up the lanes. The pass blocking has been fine. Fantastic, as always. Parker Brailsford has been great at center as a redshirt freshman. Troy Fatano and Roger Rosengard are the 2 tackles. Again, another flawless season for them. So so everybody knows Washington can pass the ball, right? It's a matter of, can they establish the run, control a little bit more clock. And it's not a matter of run to set up the pass. I don't want to say that that's what they're doing, but just have enough semblance of the run game so Michael Penix doesn't have to get, not pinned back. But because if you're counting on Penix to throw the ball like against Utah's defense, Utah's defense is going to just pin their ears back and chase after him. And if they can find lanes, especially up the middle, which is where Washington has struggled this season, that's how the Arizona State game is the recipe for success of how to stop Washington defensively. Brian Ward put out the perfect blueprint. Now, Ryan Grubb played into his hand a little bit by just having a few interesting play calls. I'll just put it that way. I was critical of his play calling that game, and I don't regret saying that because it was one of the more bizarre play calling games he's had. As long as Grubb doesn't get kind of backed into a corner that way, I think this offense, I don't expect Jalen McMillan, one of the junior receivers, to play. He's coming back from a leg injury, we'll just call it that he suffered against Michigan State in the first half. Tried to come back against Oregon, tried to come back against USC. He's just started running this week, so I don't know if he's going to be full go, but that means the run, to answer your question again, that's why the run game has to matter more, because Dylan Johnson showed, hey, I can run for 100. That was his second career 100-yard game, and he ran for 256. Granted, it was against USC, so Utah's defense is going to be a lot better. There's no aberrations that Utah's defense is going to allow that or anywhere near that on the ground. But I do think, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong on this, Utah can get had in the secondary more so than they can get had against the run. So I think if Penix is able to find those open windows, possibly to Jeremy Bernard, Jalen Polk, Roma Dunze, all of his receivers, I think if it's a shootout, Washington wins it. It's a blowout, to Alex's point. If you can force Washington to punt the ball a couple of times in the first half and control the run game, now Washington kind of has to answer the answer, which they haven't necessarily shown they can do this season, because that's exactly what Arizona State did. They managed to. I mean, UW had 13 yards rushing against Arizona State at home. That cannot happen.
So before you guys kick into the next one here, I just want to interject about Utah's secondary, right? I mean, it's a good secondary, but at the same time, too, like when you face the quarterbacks that are good scrambling outside the pocket and keeping plays alive, like Bo Nix, like Caleb Williams, that's where Utah is going to have major issues, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but Penix pretty much stays in the pocket, and so I'm not saying that he's going to have less success than those guys would have had, but I think that adds an interesting wrinkle in it where Utah can pin their ears back and just rush him, like they've been known to do all year.
That is a fair assessment that he's certainly nowhere near Bo Nix or Caleb Williams as a runner. Let's just call it what it is there. However, he did have a 31-yard, what should have been a receiving touchdown from Jalen McMillan in the Apple Cup last year. So he showed he can run 30 yards and not get tackled. So, I mean, he is athletic enough, and he showed, I mean, the 22-yarder to Devin Culp in the end zone was by far one of his better plays of the season. And that was rolling away towards Washington's bench, avoiding a couple of USC pass rushers. So he's not like Peyton Manning back there where he's a statue who can't run. And when he does run, it looks like a very ugly horse. But with that being said, I love Peyton Manning, but I just had to get that in there. But to your point, he's certainly not known as a runner. So I think if Utah can and that's where the edges come into play, right? That's where if you can either get pressure up the middle, ideally you're going to want to get pressure up the middle, because that's where UW has struggled this season. Whether it's with Julius Buillow, Garen Hatchett, who's going to be out for the game with an ankle injury, and Nate Kalepo at left guard, that's where Washington's been more susceptible, because Troy Furtado and Roger Rosengarten are probably two of the best tackles in the conference, if not some of. I know they're not Joe Alt, but some of the best in the country from a pass blocking perspective. So Utah, if they can get pressure up the middle, and that's where Arizona State stunted. So if Utah kind of brings some wrinkles defensively to kind of disguise their pressure or kind of throw Penix off his game, really that's all you have to do. You don't have to sack Penix. You just have to get him off his timing. It's the old West Coast offense sort of thing. It's a timing offense. Not completely a timing offense, but a lot of it is timing based.
It simply comes down to containing, in my opinion. I mean, in those close games, statistically speaking, the closer games have been decided by possession, maybe two, like that ASU game or Oregon. Penix has been closer to about 300 yards passing. So I think if Utah could kind of keep him in that 250, 300 range, it's going to likely put them in a position to at least be competitive and maybe win the football game. You're not going to shut him down completely, but if you can contain him and keep him below that number, it's going to put Utah in a good spot. So if you're on the coaching staff, Washington coaching staff, is there a position group that's just keeping you up at night on Utah side of the football, where you're just thinking, I don't know how I'm going to handle these guys on Saturday?
I don't know if it's not that I don't know if they can't handle it, but the running game is kind of where Washington has struggled. It's because Utah has a good offensive line, and again, I don't mean to cite PFF too much here, but Utah's offensive line efficiency, I believe, is number 12 in the conference, which is a little surprising to me. That doesn't mean they're a terrible line, right? They're nowhere near terrible, but from an efficiency standpoint, it seems like they can get had. But this also seems like a perfect opportunity to Utah to rise to the occasion. I mean, I've said this on a couple of different shows. I said it on a USC show last week, where you're going to get everybody's best punch, and Utah can pack a strong punch. So, and Kyle Whittingham, I have the utmost respect for as a coach and person. It's a great dude to talk to, just like Alex and Cole, you as well. But those type of programs, those type of games, to where the running game is going to be a huge opportunity. And Washington doesn't have Asa Turner, which their senior safety, who's missed a number of games this season. And Washington has been susceptible at, allowing big runs. I mean, Bucky Irving, who gashes everybody like greased up deaf guy, gassed Washington again this season. So there's opportunities for Utah in the run game to be had. I mean, Barnes doesn't scare me if I'm Chuck Morrell or Williams, the co-defensive coordinators, but the running game certainly does. And so it's a matter of, as long as Utah can have a couple of healthy backs. I don't know how much Rocky plays when they have a healthy back, because I know against certain times this season he was kind of thrown in as the emergency back. And things like that. I mean, that's not a player that scares me, but a player to watch is Vaki. That to me, that it's more the run game, but how they use it. Because I mean, it's a 12:30 kickoff midday, so you're not waiting around all day. So if Utah's up to the occasion and they control that clock early, and that's the one thing that does scare me, is using the run game to control the clock, because teams have found out, how do you contain Washington, Cole, to your point? Take away as many possessions as possible. And how you do that is eat up clock. Have a few 5-minute drives, 4-minute drives, because Washington can score on a dime. It doesn't 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minutes, however you want to classify it, they can score at will. So it's a matter of, hey, well, let's give them less possessions by controlling the ball more. Arizona had a 7-minute possession and they only lost by 7. So this team, that's kind of where this game goes to me, right? Where
most of those close games, the opponents for Washington had 10, 12 minutes more possession, even, so yeah, totally.
Cole, he actually said something interesting there that I'm gonna have to blow up Dustin about. So, Lars, we got this guy Dustin Birch. He does some good stuff with just inside the numbers, so some PFF stuff. There was a game it was within the last 3 or 4 weeks where it almost looked like the PFF system was broken. Like, I don't know what in the hell happened. And Cole, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, you might have seen it, but I swear it was something with Utah's offensive line grades where if you watch that game, they did not play that bad at all. But the grades, they were like so much lower than typical that I'm almost wondering if, like, PFF wise, like you mentioned, if that's what bottomed it out, because it was weird, man. It made no sense on those numbers, because Utah's offense has struggled at times. A lot of times with like penalties, just shooting themselves in the foot. But for the most part, man, I mean, they've actually done pretty well. So that's interesting that you mentioned 12th. So.
Yeah, and again, like I said, I don't mean to shout. Like, that's not a shot at the offensive.
Oh line. Yeah, no, I know you're not.
Play like that. They certainly don't. They're not the 12th worst, the 12th best offensive line in the conference. But looking at some of those, I mean, yeah. But to your point, I mean, there's a number. I mean, I don't remember Jabbar Muhammad being targeted once against USC, and they had him for 8 targets or 9 targets and like 40 or 50 yards. I'm like, how are you classifying some of these numbers here? So that's a good point. I'm glad you mentioned that, because PFF works for the narrative when you want it to, but also absolutely does not work for like 98% of things.
They liked USC's defense early in the season, so that tells you something. They threw a tight end on the PFF first team offense last week that didn't even get a target all game last week against Utah. So I don't know, man, but I know we gotta get wrapping this thing up here in a second, but
So Lars, just kind of moving on to our last few questions here. Briefly, what are 2 or 3 keys to victory for Washington?
Score early, don't get behind the sticks, and don't be terrible at stopping. And don't be terrible in the run game. That's all on both sides of the ball. Both sides, run defense and rushing the ball. If you have under 50 yards at halftime, you're screwed. Rushing the ball. If Utah has over 130 at halftime, which is very possible, like that's kind of my concern, is if you can manage it, if you can go into halftime up 4, up 7, even tied, right? If it's close at halftime, you're okay, but score first so you're not behind, because once they've gotten behind, they've stayed behind, and that's the Arizona State game.
Definitely. Now, if you're drawing up a game plan, and you've kind of talked about it a little bit, but just so that our listeners know exactly how Utah, in your opinion, should be, going at Washington, attacking Washington. Again, just briefly, how would you do that offensively and defensively if you're Utah?
So the one thing that you have to do against Washington is you have to be able to get quick passes. Even if you have a quarterback that doesn't throw for 300, which Utah hasn't had this season, but you just have to have that semblance of a pass game, right? Just, hey, get a check down to or wheel route to a running back, just anything. But the ball has to get out quick, because if you're doing a 5-step drop back, Braylon Trice and ZTF, who are in ZTF extra motivated because he lost his father a week and a half ago, which is just a terrible situation for him. But he had a big game against USC. He's been kind of not under the radar this season, but I think he's kind of focusing at the right time and kind of crescendoing at the right time, to where if Barnes holds the ball for even 2 or 3 seconds, it's over, because I have a hard time seeing UW's edges not get pressure against a good but not great Utah offensive line. Fair classification there.
Sure.
And Braylon Trice obviously has led the nation in pressures the last 2 weeks, which Washington calls them havoc plays. So again, if you can cause havoc on Utah's offense, and if you force them one dimensional and you just force them to run the ball and you can stop it, then that's an easy win for Washington, because as average as their secondary has been, if you can't pass the ball, you're not going to do anything against this defense. So you have to be able to have somewhat of a balanced offense. You can still go 60-40, even 70-30, but Barnes has to have at least 200 yards in this game for Utah to win the game. And I'm not saying I'm not a big yards equal wins guy, but it's that semblance of the pass, right? Even if it's 5 yards, 7 yards, 5 yards, 7 yards, just enough to where it's not so predictable that Washington can completely sell out to stop the run, which they're probably going to do.
Sure. I mean, there's just because you get to a certain number of yards doesn't automatically mean you're going to win a football game, but there's consistencies. And if that's, the consistency that's been shown, that's definitely a good number for Utah to look at. In terms of defense, you kind of talked about, Utah really needs to put pressure on Penix. They need to make sure that they're, shutting. That's the way that they can contain him. Is there any more kind of to build off that defensively for Utah?
This is a half joke here. I dare Utah to leave Rome Odunze one-on-one coverage and see what happens. Like, teams have done that so many times this season, and I have not figured out why. Especially without Jalen McMillan, if you bracket Rome or if you bracket Jalen Polk, that forces Penix to have to look to his third, fourth read. And that's where those sacks and pressures come into play. Because if he's able to just pre-snap see, I have one-on-one coverage with Rome, I'm taking that bet 9 out of 10 times. If I have Jalen Polk 1-on-1, I'm taking that bet 9 out of 10 times. And I mean, even the touchdown that Rome had to beat Oregon, it was good coverage, but Rome's just better. And so if you leave Washington's receivers 1-on-1 or even somewhat 1-on-1, that's a recipe for disaster. I don't care if Washington has 20 yards rushing the ball. That's game over.
I believe of the almost 3,500 yards passing that the Washington Huskies have, that those two top receivers have about 1,900 of it. So there's definitely reason to make sure that those guys are being shut down, and that they're sticking those secondary defenders on them every single play. Lars, the big question, the last question: what's your score prediction and why?
So I believe I said, is it 35-24? Washington. I believe but I have it as a close game at a halftime, and Washington pulling away, maybe getting a field goal touchdown combination in the fourth quarter to ice that win away. Ironically, I took a FanDuel bet, and it was Washington 2 field goals and 2 touchdowns. Was plus 950. So I'm like, okay, easy hammer there, because points are going to be had in this game, but not too many, right? So I don't think Washington gets over 40, especially against a great defense like Utah. They'll probably get, I wouldn't be surprised if it was like 21-17 at halftime, and then Washington just kind of edges their way a little bit past at the end. But Utah's it's a 4-quarter punch. I mean, Utah's not going to go away. And I think even if Washington has a 10-point lead at halftime, I would say, hey, that's not comfortable. Like, the only comfortable lead here is like 28-0 at halftime, and I don't see that happening. I mean, just defensively, I have a hard time seeing that happening for Utah. I think Utah puts up a good fight. They lose, but I personally would rather have Utah win, because Washington can still have the Pac-12 championship at play, and it makes things interesting. Maybe pushes Oregon out. I don't know, but try to find out how some of these Pac-12 championship matchups could work would be interesting.
Lars, is that the Wazoo guy in you though, bro? Because that probably puts their backs up against the wall for the CFP. If Utah wins.
I was gonna say, but yeah, that's the thing though, is Washington. I came into the season thinking Washington would have 1 loss. It was against USC. That was my 14-1, 15-1 was my preseason prediction.
You have more faith in Alex Grinch than everybody else did then, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, after my conversation with Lincoln Riley at media day, I guess I must have drank too much Kool-Aid with him. But and some other thing. But no, Washington. It's the Arizona State game showed Washington can get got. And I think they might have one loss this season, but if they don't, it's going to also be close. And so I think Utah is another game to where it keeps it close. Washington probably stays at 5 in the CFP again, even though a ranked win should move them up. I don't know. There's a weird situation that seems to be going on. I don't buy Florida State. That's just me personally, but and I'm not going to touch the Michigan thing, so that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, I'm not a Harbaugh fan, but it goes back to the Alex Smith days, so we'll leave it at that.
Exactly.
Cole, what's your prediction, man? I'm staying out of this.
No, I mean, we were talking about it a little bit before, and I think, Alex, you mentioned that I think it's going to go. You could see it going one of two ways, right? It's either a blowout or it's close, and I agree with you. I don't know. We do this every week. I don't love score predictions because I feel like most of the times I just end up with pie on my face. But so I like to kind of give generalizations, and my generalization is, yeah, either the Huskies absolutely run away with it early, especially if they can score early. If they can kind of mirror what Oregon did to Utah, it could get ugly fast. And yeah, it could get ugly fast, and it could be completely out of reach. And Washington waltzes to another victory, and a game that could be a big trap game for the Huskies. Goes kind of by the wayside easily, or you know, Utah's been known to get up for these types of games, and their backs are against the wall, and they want to defend their Pac-12 championship and three-peat, especially it's the last year. So it's going to go one of those two ways. I think it's very heavily decided upon what happens in the first quarter, second quarter. What's the score at halftime? Is it a one possession game or is it three possessions? That could definitely determine what's going on. So we'll see. Like I said, I don't like to put numbers out there because it just generally doesn't go well. So we'll stick with the general.
Hey, Lars, your choice though. Should we force him on a prediction?
No, I won't force you to do that, but I will tell you this, Cole. I had Washington beating Arizona State 52-17. Look how that came out. So yeah. So after that, I have picked Washington to still win. I picked them to beat USC, even though I preseason did not. And I'm picking them again this weekend. But until I see the offense return to what I know it can be, I am not taking anything over plus 10 or 12. Like I'll respectably keep it within a couple of possessions there.
Well, that's
fair. I will not. I'm not going to bet on the blowout, even though to your point, that I could see it being 48-20 easily. Yeah. But totally. I ain't about to say that with conviction until I actually see it happen. Then I'll be okay. Now it's back. Now we can go forward.
Sure. It could also be 35-27. Something close like that. Yeah. But Lars, thanks so much for coming on, man. It was a pleasure
shout out your stuff real fast, buddy.
Yeah. Tell us where people can find your stuff.
Yeah, so just si.com/college/Washington. You can find all of my written work there. And then Lockdown Huskies is the podcast that I co-host with Roman Tomashoff. We both write for SI Washington. So those two places are where you can find me. And then at Lars Hanson on Twitter, which I'll try and engage with you. It's not personal if I don't. I told Alex that as always. But I try and have some fun on Twitter every now and then. But that place is accessible, so it's hit or miss.
It used to be fun, man. It used to be fun. I'm right there with you.
All right, guys, it's been fun.
Lars, thanks, buddy. It's been awesome catching up with you, pal. So appreciate you, Cole.
Good luck this weekend, guys.
All right, talk to you soon, man.